IUIC is at it again and being very dishonest, so let's get into it.
The Edomites are going to be wiped out. They're not even being offered salvation at all. So how y'all saying that salvation's for everybody?
We don't believe everyone will be saved, but anyone can be saved. Talking about the Edomites, the ancient Israelites certainly had no issue with Edomites being saved. That's why they converted them to being Jews. That's why they identified Job as a Edomite. We can see this in the epilogue to the Septuagint. We can see this in the writings of Aristeas the Exegete. We can see this in the Testament of Job. All works that are dated to contemporary with or prior to Jesus, and none of which find repudiation by the apostles or Jesus or anyone else. We also have the simple case of the fact that the Jews converted the Edomites to being Jews. We see this in the works of Josephus, where he says in Antiquities of the Jews, chapter 13, 257 and 258, which we're going to look at in a minute, he says that the converted Edomites were hereafter considered to be Jews. This is consistent with conversion and what happens, and so certainly they did not believe that they had no hope of salvation.
If salvation's for everybody, there should be no nation that God's saying he's going to complete.
As far as my understanding is, the nation of Edom is already destroyed, right?
And this is consistent with history. Let's look, for example, in the works of Josephus. Here is Antiquities of the Jews 13. It says, Hyrcanus took also Dora and Marissa, cities of Idumea, and subdued all the Idumeans, and permitted them to stay in that country if they would circumcise their genitals and make use of the law of the Jews. And they were so desirous of living in the country of their forefathers that they submitted to the use of circumcision and the rest of the Jewish ways of living. At which time, therefore, this befell them, that they were hereafter no more than Jews. So Hyrcanus conquered them. Now, at this point in time, they'd already been removed from the land of Edom. They were living in Idumea, which was southern Judea. And when this happened, they were forcibly integrated into the nation of Israel. They became Jews. And so there was no longer a distinct nation of people that was the house of Esau. They ceased to be as such. They were now simply part of the house of Israel.
How? When did it happen?
Hey, can somebody grab that verse in Jeremiah?
You know how you're going to prove yourself wrong, because the Edomites was around during the time of Jesus.
Yeah, the nation, as a nation, they wasn't.
They were called the Idumeans. Well, who was
wasn't
Herod?
a nation.
Herod was an Edomite.
It wasn't a nation.
Now, I'm not sure if there was some editing going on there with the verse in Jeremiah. I'm not sure what that's in reference to specifically, so I'm not going to comment on that. But this source that was just given, that was a really bad source for them to use. So they're citing The Rise of Christendom by Edward Johnson from 1890. And there's a couple of problems. One, the source that he's working with in this context is an Islamic source. Two, he says it's an allegory or a symbol. Three, the same source says Job is an Edomite. Let's just look at it. Page 157. Jacob and his posterity were prophets, but no son of Esau was a prophet except Job. But on 159 it says, this legend is designed to explain the enmity that was felt to be a standing one between the peoples of whom the twins are symbolic. Notice that the twins are symbolic of these people. Goes on to state, the chronicle explains that by the race of Esau is meant the Greeks, and that Raum was a son of Esau, whose children gained possession of the land of the Greeks. In other words, the Arabians mean by the sons of Esau the inhabitants of the Roman Empire. The Jewish chronicler designates the same by Edom. But notice, this is a symbolic designation. So ultimately, they're just being dishonest in quoting this. let's look at more of the context of the next reference too. First, at the top, let's notice that the Greeks and the Romans are distinguished from the Idumeans. It says they were then, that's talking about after the capturing and subjugation then by Hyrcanus, they were then incorporated with the Jewish nation, and their country was called by the Greeks and Romans Idumea. So here we notice that they're not actually part of Greece or Rome. They're a distinct people in what is literal. Now, when we get to this bottom paragraph, it does say the name Edom is applied by the Talmudists for the Roman Empire. But this, like our other source, is symbolic. It is not literal, as there is a plethora of scholarship to attest to. But it's clear even in this text where I have it highlighted. It says, the Talmudists, however, made an exception in favor of autonomous pious, whom they assured would attain paradise because he had not acted in the manner of Esau. So he reigned, or lived rather, from the end of the 1st century AD into the mid-2nd century AD. And he was a Roman emperor. But he is excluded because it is symbolic based upon his behavior. It is not based upon his genealogy.
There's no, in Obadiah, it says there shall be no Edomites remaining at all.
That's not what it says. It says, well, let's just look at it. And the house of Jacob shall be a fire, and the house of Joseph a flame, and the house of Esau for stubble, and they shall kindle in them and devour them, and there shall not be any remaining of the house of Esau, for the Lord hath spoken it. Now, you can say I'm playing semantics, but I'm not. It's not just a semantic distinction to say that there is a difference between there shall be none remaining of the house of Esau and that there shall be no Edomites remaining. Very significant difference, as we're going to see.
That means when Jesus came, there shouldn't even have been an Edomite named Herod.
It wasn't. I mean, well, he was an Idumean.
No,
those are
that's the Greek name. That is the Greek name for Edom.
Those are people that come from, what you say?
All right, now we're going to see the difference. There is a difference between saying that there's not going to be anyone of a bloodline remaining and anyone of a house remaining. You see, when the Idumeans converted, much like in the book of Judith with Achior the Ammonite, they joined the house of Israel. And when Achior had seen all that the God of Israel had done, he believed in God greatly and circumcised the flesh of his foreskin and was joined unto the house of Israel unto this day. The Idumeans were either eliminated or they were converted. And when they converted, they were joined, just like Achior, to the house of Israel. Well, when they joined the house of Israel, they were no longer part of the house of Esau. They were now part of the house of Israel. This is just like in Genesis chapter 17, where people that were not of Abraham's descent were part of the house of Abraham. And Abraham took Ishmael his son, and all that were born in his house, and all that were bought with money, every male among the men of Abraham's house, and circumcised the flesh of their foreskin in the selfsame day, as God had said unto him. These men, though not of, in the majority, Abraham's bloodline, they weren't his descendants, they were still part of Abraham's house because they had joined with his house. In the same way, when the Edomites joined with Israel, they joined the house of Israel. And so as a result, they were part of that people. They left their old house. They were no longer part of that house. They no longer were a separate nation. They were part of Israel, which is why when it came time to deal with Rome and defend the temple, 20,000 of them joined in defending the temple. Ultimately, then, what this tells us is that IUIC is just being dishonest. They are giving selective, out-of-context citations that misrepresent what the sources they're using actually say. So be very careful when IUIC cites something for you, because there's a good chance it's probably not what the author really meant.